3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. Today, our Group 11, consisting of Shuya, Gracie, Adley, Aisha, and Chow, will be presenting on animal rights. We chose this topic because animals are a vital part of our world. They provide companionship, help maintain ecosystems, and even contribute to human health and research. But at the same time, many animals suffer due to human activities like factory farming, animal testing, and the entertainment industry. The concept of animal rights poses an important question. Should animals be treated as property or as living beings with rights of their own? I will examine how this idea evolved, its current status, and why it remains a topic of conversation and debate. We'll start by defining what animal rights mean, then look at its historical background, and even discuss a real-life court case that shows how complex this issue can be. Let's begin by first defining animal rights. So, animal rights is the belief that animals have an inherent right to live free from suffering, harm, and exploitation caused by humans. This means that animals shouldn't be used for medical experiments, clothing, entertainment, or hunting, because these practices often ignore their ability to feel pain, fear, or distress. Supporters of animal rights believe that just because humans have more power and intelligence doesn't mean that they have the moral right to control or harm other living beings. The main idea is equality of consideration. In other words, animals deserve moral respect simply because they can experience life and emotions. So animal rights challenge us to think how humans interact with other species, encouraging compassion, responsibility, and protection instead of dominance. The roots of animal rights movements can be traced all the way back to the Industrial Revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. During that time, the use of animals in factories, farms, and laboratories increased drastically. With industrialization came new forms of animal cruelty. Animals were often viewed as machines or property rather than living creatures. This sparked the first significant efforts to protect animals. Organizations such as the RSCPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, were founded in the early 1800s to promote humane treatment. As the movement grew, philosophers and activists began to argue that animals deserved rights similarly to human rights, not only protection from cruelty, but recognition of their own moral and legal status. Okay. One major legal case that helped define animal rights in the United States was the United States versus Stevens, decided by the Supreme Court in 2010. Robert J. Stevens was convicted under federal law that banned the sale of videos depicting animal cruelty, specifically dog fighting. These videos were known as crush videos, which showed graphic acts of animal abuse for profit. However, when the case reached the Supreme Court, the justices ruled in an 8-1 decision that the law was unconstitutional because it was too broad and violated the First Amendment right to free speech. The court explained that while the government can regulate certain types of speech, such as obscenity or incitement, the law in this case could also punish individuals who distribute hunting videos or educational documentaries. So this case showed the ongoing challenge between protecting animals and protecting freedoms of expression. It highlighted that even when laws are created with good intentions, they must still balance with constitutional rights. Although the ruling was controversial, it brought national attention to animal cruelty and inspired lawmakers to craft more specific laws targeting harmful practices without infringing on free speech.
And now we'll be moving on to the different philosophers for animal rights. We have Peter Singer, who we'll be talking about more today. We have Tom Regan and Gary Francois. It's a French name, I don't know. And then we have Peter Singer, as I was saying. He is also known as the father of the modern animal rights movement. He is a big advocate for it. He is an Australian philosopher born in 1946, July 6th. I said this before, I thought he was dead, but he's actually alive right now. He is a professor at bioethics of Princeton University. And one of his major works is actually Animal Liberation, which we'll be talking about today because it talks about his view. He has a great impact on this because of that book that we'll be talking. And yeah, moving on. His main argument is all beings capable of suffering deserve equal moral consideration. Like, if you're able to feel pain and pleasure, you matter, basically. Your rights matter. Okay, the big idea is for him is you have rationalities for people, but animals lack that. In this, he argues that if you're able to feel pleasure or pain, that's all that matters. It doesn't matter if you can't rationalize, because your feelings can translate that. Like, when you're scared, even animals feel scared. They know when they're in danger. That's why they run and hide. And he says ignoring animal suffering just because they're not human is a form of discrimination, like racism and sexism. But it's based on species. Which I do agree with that, because you are kind of lacking their rights. They are able to feel what they feel. And if you're not considering that, it's kind of like you're outcasting them in a way. And now we'll be talking about his book, Animal Liberation. It is also considered the foundational text of animal rights. You can't go without an argument about animal rights unless you're including this, because this is where all of it comes from. He argues against speciesism, which people believe they're superior than animals, and they don't get the same thing, like the same rights. And he actually argues that they deserve equal consideration because they're also sentimental beings like we do. We're all mammals in the end. He criticizes factory farming and animal experimentation. About their cruelty, he talks a lot about that in his books, because sometimes people just do unnecessary things when they don't have to. And as I was saying, some people do cruel things even though they don't have to, because they see it as an animal. And in reality, it's like they feel as we feel. Like, when you separate a puppy from his mom, people think they don't feel the impact, but they actually do. Like, I got my dog when he was 4 months, and he had siblings that were younger, and you could tell by the impact of how they grew up. They lacked the mother, Mm-hmm. So some of their qualities weren't really fully functional because they were taken too soon. That's really cruel, because you wouldn't take a baby from their mom too young, because they can't function without it. But they force animals to adapt. Animals can adapt as we can. Why aren't we considering them, And moving on from that, we have the two different views, which is utilitarianism and contrarialism. I mispronounced that, sorry. And these two are the main arguments of animal rights. Utilitarianism is all beings capable of suffering deserve equal consideration. It is if the actions are right, if they maximize overall happiness and minimize suffering. But you can't really do that if you aren't considering animals. Humans may be happy, but you think the animals are happy getting butchered? I don't think so, personally. I wouldn't be happy with that. The moral worth is based on their ability to suffer or feel pleasure, as I've been mentioning. That's the huge argument. It's their fear takes over regardless. And the opposite side is basically more on the rationality side. They focus more on the rationality. They argue that it is to protect human interests rather than the animals. It's this side, the whole argument is basically the rationality of it. But I honestly would frankly disagree with that, because I feel like animals do feel as much as we do. And as I've been mentioning, I feel like humans are sometimes cruel when they don't have to be, just to prove a point. Because we could function without doing the cruelty we do to animals. We really could. I feel like there's many healthier ways to go about it rather than the factory farming, the experimentational, for medicine especially. We are really cruel to animals. Yes, humans are gaining from that, but at the same time, we're also harming the animals.
Okay, here are some philosophers against animal rights, and we bring Carl Cohen and Rene Descartes. Okay, next slide. Carl Cohen, born in 1931 and then died in 2023, which is 2 years ago. And then he's a American professor, and he's also American philosopher. He works in University of Michigan. His focus areas are ethics, political philosophers, medical ethics, and logic. Next slide. Okay, so his argument on animal rights, which is also against animal rights. Okay, first of all, rights requires moral agency. Only beings capable of making moral judgment and understanding duties can possess rights, not animals. Animals lack this capacity, so they cannot be right holders. Second, animals have interests, not rights. While animals can suffer and have interest, rights involve a reciprocal obligation within a moral community, which is something that animal does not have, so they cannot have rights. That's the second argument. And then third, human obligations does not equal to animal rights because humans have moral duties to treat animals humanly, but these duties arise from human ethics, not because animals possess rights by themselves. Okay, next one, we're going to René Descartes. René Descartes, born in 1596 and then died in 1650. He's a French philosopher, a mathematician, and then a scientist. Fun fact about him is that he spent a lot of time in Sweden, so I believe he can count as a Sweden philosopher too. Okay, and then his focus areas are metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, and then mathematics and physics, which makes him a genius. Yeah, a genius. And then his ethics. Okay, next about his arguments against animal rights is dualism, which is the mind and the body part. Animals lacking this soul were seen as automata, biological machines without consciousness or moral agency. Descartes believed that only humans possess a rational, immaterial souls capable of thoughts, language, and self-awareness. Second, moral consideration requires rationality. In Descartes' ethics, moral worth is tied to reason. Since the animal cannot reason or reflect, they fall outside the sphere of moral duty. I totally agree with what Carl Cohen and René Descartes said about against animal rights, because creatures that lack self-awareness and moral judgment does not have rights. Animals only know survival of fittest. It is more like a law of nature, like only the strongest and the smartest in the nature could survive, not the weakest and the dumbest. They do not have the right to survive, which they could finally be a dish on the table or even just die in nature. On the other hand, humans are different. That is why humans can hold rights, because also humans by themselves believe the survival of fitness. The strongest could be more powerful, but on the other hand, they bring rights to the weakness, so they could use the rights. They can use the rights to defend themselves and survive in this like cruel environment. The reason people setting laws and boundaries is why they can differ from the animals, and then so when they cross the boundaries, people could take the right. So it is the soul and the consciousness which brings the privilege to humans to have rights. And that's it.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm going to take over from here, and then this part we'll be exploring how different religions view animal rights. And we'll be just focusing on three major religions in the world, namely Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. And first we have Buddhism. So Buddhism is considered an animal-friendly religion, as many of its doctrines teach the followers to treat animals kindly. And according to the Encyclopedia of Buddhism, published in 2004, so this paper said that according to the Buddhist thought, animals are regarded as sentient beings with the capacity to experience suffering and pleasures. And also the core belief of the Buddhist thought believe that all sentient beings, including humans, are part of the cycle of rebirth, meaning that all human could be reborn as an animal, and any animal could be reborn as a human. And with that being said, all animals that we interact with, see today, could have been our past relatives, or our past mothers, or fathers, or even friends. And therefore, Buddhists will try not to harm or kill or inflict any pain on animals, even if it's just a cockroach or a mosquito. And this is stated clearly in the 5 precepts, which is the ethical guideline of Buddhism. And a similar respect for all living beings also appears in Hinduism. So Hinduism also opposes ahimsa, which is the ancient Indian principle of nonviolence, which applies to actions towards all living beings. So in Hindu teachings, they hold the belief that all living creatures have a soul, and they also think that an act of killing animals is considered will bring bad or negative karma, as it violates the principle of ahimsa. And also in this religion, cows are considered sacred, and they are associated with Aditi, the mother of all gods in Hindu scriptures. And moving on, we have Christianity. So the relationship between animal rights and Christianity is a little bit complex. However, the Christian attitudes toward animal rights have evolved over centuries. So in Genesis 1:26-28, humans are given dominion over animals, which somehow makes some early Christians interpreted this view as a permission to use animals freely. However, this view has changed by modern theologians. So they reinterpret dominion as stewardship, that is a responsibility to care with love for creation, just like the way how God cares for humanity. And another Christian love for animals is Saint Francis of Assisi in the 13th century. He referred to animals as his brothers and sisters. He sees all creatures as a reflection of God's beauty. And fast forward to today, there are even Christian vegetarian animal welfare movement. For example, we have the Christian Vegetarian Association. So in general, Christianity is moving from a view of ownership to a view of kinship, where everyone recognizes that all creatures are part of God's family. Next, we have the animal rights movement. So the first movement that acted against animal suffering was in 1635 in Ireland. So this is an act against plowing by tail and pulling the wool off living sheep. So it is also known as the first animal protection legislation. And moving forward to the 19th century, especially in England, in 1824, the first Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was funded by a group of reformers. And this organization later became the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, RSPCR, in 1840, after Queen Victoria granted it royal status. And in the 20th century, another organization for animal rights and welfare was funded in Rockville, Maryland, which is called PETR, standing for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And in the 21st century, the Environmental Protection Agency announces plans to reduce and eventually eliminate the use of mammals to test the toxicity of chemicals. So even though animal rights has faced numerous challenges throughout its history, well, thankfully today the world has recognized it, and the rights of animals are widely supported by many people.
Hello, my name is Aja, and I will be talking about the Animal Rights Society view. There is a trend towards great concerns for animal welfare. There is more public awareness and a desire for human treatment, especially in the younger generation of people. Some society views are still divided between those who believe animals have rights and should be treated as individuals and those who believe in some protection but that animals can be used for human benefits. One view is for strong animal rights. This view does not allow for animals to be resources. It allows to give animals almost the same rights of humans. Another society view is one for welfare. This view allows for animal use as a resource and to make sure that animals are not treated with harm. A third view is unrated view. This view only seeks to prevent explicit acts of harm to animals. The modern-day animals' rights movement traces back to the Industrial Revolutions. The movement has evolved over time, and the end goal is to stop all human activity that causes animal suffering. The news of the society shapes how animal rights laws are made. Laws are different amongst countries and states. Home-living animals usually receive greater protection than farm or wild animals. The conclusion information that I found on animals' rights society views was society views and protection for animal rights is progressing and there is rising public awareness. Issues are being addressed by movements, even though there are still challenges. The movements from animal rights are growing. More about conclusions of animal rights I found is legal gaps in rights come from the fact that animals are not human and some do not see themselves having the same rights. Animals are important to society population because they provide service like food sources and can offer emotional support that contributes major effect to the well-being of animals. Animals are important. They can help with a lot in this world, and they should be taken care of just like a human should be taken care of. And no one wants to see an animal hurting or in bad harm. All animals should be fed well, taken care of, bathed, in a good home, and taken to the vet and getting shots and just taking good care of so animals will not have to worry about bad harm or people that they're with not taking good care of them in the society, because that's what's going on with a lot of animals right now, and no one wants to see animal having to deal with bad harm or anything. So yeah.